How much should I charge? Every designer asks this question at some point, and most answers online fall into these two buckets. Just charge more, bro, or it depends. And neither of these help because there's such a large gap between how much you can charge and how much you should charge. And the fastest way to close that gap isn't confidence, it's your business logic, it's your pricing logic. So today I want to break down how pricing works for designers, how to build pricing logic in your practice, and what determines your number. Hi, I'm Sushant. I'm a senior industrial designer. I work for companies like these, and I've dabbled in hardware, art, brand, and content over the last decade. I have lived across the world, worked in corporates and agencies, and I've also gone freelance. But perhaps my biggest achievement is building Young Designers India, which is the largest support network for Indian creatives all around the world. All right, let's get into it. I'm going to take you back to my college days where I was making artworks and logos for bands, and my first artwork actually sold for $30. I know. I had just learned Photoshop, and album artworks was kind of intuitive to me, so I just started selling those on Facebook. 2 years later, I was selling the same kind of work for roughly $600 to $1,000 per project, and for context, it took me roughly 3 to 4 days to finish one project. Now, to be fair, my work did improve over those 2 years. I became much faster, but some months I was making $3,000 to $4,000, and as a part-time college student living in India, that was just pure profit to me. So what really changed between $30 to $1,000? Well, first, I had leverage. I had real experience, real clients, and my skills also improved over time. And second, I built pricing logic as a freelancer. Now, most designers think that pricing grows linearly with skill. But in reality, pricing grows when these three things mature together. First is your understanding of value provided. Second is your ability to scope work. And third is your confidence in outcomes, not the effort put in. Because in all honesty, I was actually putting in less effort this time than my first gig ever. Now fast forward a year and I was offering industrial design services to clients. And while I had some wins under my belt, there was one project that permanently changed how I priced myself. Look, on paper, this project was pretty straightforward. It had defined deliverables, a rough timeline, and a lump sum fee to cover all of that. But in reality, the scope kept creeping up, and this is far too common in any relationship where there's a service provider and there's a client. But in my case, it was more feedback, more revisions. The timelines kept dragging and the client just wanted more and more. I was early in my career, I didn't have boundaries, my contract was very loose. But the most important part was I didn't have pricing mechanisms to protect me and my work. Look, the work wasn't bad, but I started resenting it. And simply because I wasn't compensated for that effort. Chances are that you have felt that way at some point in your career, but I want you to acknowledge that resentment. It is real, it is almost dangerous. And it makes sense, right? The moment you feel underpaid or maybe the value you're offering, you're not getting the same in return, that's the moment frustration starts to breed. Your motivation drops, your work suffers, and then of course all of that bleeds into the client experience you're trying to offer. That's why pricing is not just a money problem, it is a sustainability problem, it's a business problem. Now, before I get into the method that has led to consistent results, I want to quickly discuss why your pricing is likely keeping you poor, and the fact is that it's not even your fault. So there are 4 forces that are doing real damage right now. First is design education. Dude, freelance exploded exponentially after COVID. But pricing, scope of work, contracts are barely taught in design schools. I really feel it should be its own curriculum. Second is designers themselves. Those who have made it, when you ask them about pricing, it's either silence or they're ego flexing, throwing big numbers like 10K a month, 100K a month. That's not real. That is just unrealistic for someone in a developing country with zero experience. We need real numbers and real challenges. Now, the third thing is the Indian market. Chances are you're watching from a growing country like India. The problem is simple. There is no baseline. People charge based on what their friends are charging, vibes, or sometimes desperation. There is no business logic. There's no reasonable references. So naturally, the prices are going to be all over the place. And fourth is platforms like Fiverr and Upwork. Look, I've got nothing against them, but they collapse the global talent into one feed. Now, the biggest problem with this is that the median income across the world vary greatly. So no matter what you're offering, there's always going to be someone who's happy charging a lower price. And then it becomes a race to the bottom. So if you're confused, it's not you. The system is extremely noisy and it's really hard to find the right information. Now that we have got that out of the way, let's talk about your pricing logic. Now, regardless of what field you're in, UX design, graphic design, strategy, industrial design, there's generally 2 methods of pricing your work. You can either price based on effort or you can price based on value. In other words, hourly pricing or fixed pricing. Hourly pricing is charging by the hour. The more time you spend, the more money you make. It feels safe, but it's also where most designers feel trapped because you get punished for being efficient and fast. It also turns your creative practice into bookkeeping, and it naturally invites scrutiny from clients in terms of where and how did you spend your hours. And you and I both know that creativity and time sometimes don't work with each other. I only recommend hourly in one case, and that is when the scope is unpredictable. And even then, daily, weekly, or monthly rates work so much better. They let designers block a chunk of time in advance, and the clients also get predictability without micromanaging hours. Now, fixed fee is also equally popular. The idea is simple. You define the scope of your service, which is basically your offer, and then price based on outcomes and deliverables, not hours spent. Now, I think this should be more popular, but the reason it isn't is because a lot of beginner designers fail to properly scope out something or estimate how valuable something is. So for most projects, here's what I recommend: the hybrid method. The hybrid method combines both the fixed fee model as well as the time-based model into one cohesive offering. So you start with the fixed fee, broken in phases if you want, define clear outcomes and expectations, and lock in a price for those. Then when you have reached a predictable outcome, you can shift to billing on time and materials. I'll give you a couple of examples. Production support after the main design is done. Maintenance for websites after the main website is done. Final adjustments or cleanup on graphics. Or consulting support that can go into implementation of a strategy. This method ensures that for every project you have a portion of the revenue locked and the rest is variable. This is in fact a method a lot of popular agencies use, and it works brilliantly for freelancers. Personally, it's the most reliable system I've used because it protects both sides, myself and the client. Now let's talk numbers. One of the most asked questions in our community is, should Indian designers charge global prices? Well, the answer is both yes and no. Yes, you should aim for those higher Western market rates. But if you want to increase your win rates and close more clients, you need to price yourself above competitive Indian rates but below competitive Western rates, because businesses don't want the cheapest option, and pricing too high without global standard of delivery kind of raises flags. You see senior people in the Western demographic charging like $200 or $300 per hour, even more. All of that comes with expectations. You have to have strong communication, cultural understanding, business acumen, speed, accountability, and a lot more. And if you don't have those things, it'll show through, even if you have the best design work. Now, I'm able to charge anywhere between $150 an hour to $250 an hour, mostly because I've built that context over the last decade. I have worked across industries, delivered consistent results, and all of that translates to leverage, which then translates to pricing power. I've never seen a designer land premium pricing just based on geography. It's almost always earned through some leverage. You know, one of my mentors says that the difference between somebody who's making more money for the same work that you're doing is because they simply asked for it. But along with the confidence to ask for higher prices, I think you need these three things: real outcomes, real experience, and real proof. People online make it easy to hit bigger numbers. It really isn't. There's a minimum threshold of taste, execution, and just the quality of your work to succeed in creative fields. And like I said, I had years of working with hundreds of bands before I even graduated, and that taught me a lot about instinct, feedback, client delivery, pricing, business, all of that stuff. If you're starting out, your job is to not charge a premium. Your job is to simply build leverage. Trust me, money will follow. Now, if you're pricing your offer, you should only be concerned with how much it costs to fix problems in the industry that you're serving. If a project at hand is costing $100,000 in lost revenue for a client over a year, and your solution can actually help them save at least half of that, would it be a bad idea to charge maybe $20,000 for the project? Or let's say you're doing the job of a full-time designer who theoretically costs the company maybe 15 lakh rupees a year. You should see that as a problem too, because it costs a lot to hire, train, buy equipment, insurance, all of that for that employee. So would it be a bad idea to charge 25 lakhs and above if you're taking on that responsibility as a contractor? Look, it's impossible for me to give you an exact number for your offer, but I'll give you a range for India and the US. This is based on what we see in our community, Young Designers India, and the overall industry expectations. Now, I'll leave you with some thoughts on how to look at your revenue as a freelancer in India. I actually did spend more than 2.5 years doing freelance for companies across the world, from US to Sweden, and of course serving both agencies and clients. That context is relevant because a lot of advice online doesn't really reveal what markets are being served and what industries are being targeted. If you're making under 6 lakhs a year, that's a dangerous territory. You'll actually build more leverage if you take a full-time opportunity and revisit freelance after a couple of years. If you're making between 20 lakhs and 30 lakhs a year, you're likely comfortable comfortable, but at the same time, if you have multiple clients, you're probably stretched too thin. This kind of limits how much leverage you can build to get to the next level. If you're making more than 40 lakhs a year, you're probably in the top 10% of freelance income earners. And this is the kind of money usually specialists are making. And finally, if you're making more than 1 crore a year, you're in the top 1% of freelance income earners. You obviously have some leverage here, whether that's niche expertise or a major anchor client that pays you throughout the year. And just to be clear, these aren't goals, these are just references to see where you sort of land on that table. Now, if you only take one thing away from this video, it should be this: fix your business and pricing logic. When the value you deliver and the value you're getting in return is misaligned, resentment will creep in. And resentment kills good work very quickly. If your pricing doesn't make sense to you, it'll likely not make sense to your clients either. And no matter how good your work is, your business will always be challenging. Alright, that's it for me. Subscribe to Young Designers India. If stuff like this is interesting to you and you want to go deeper into conversations around pricing, positioning, all of that good stuff, come check out Young Designers India. You'll meet 16,000 creatives just like yourself building the future of design. Bye.